not everybody does, so I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm a consulting actuary. I've spent majority of my career working in life and annuity product development. Been doing that for a little over 20 years now. Started my career at a very small subsidiary of Pan American, working in Tampa, Florida, back in 1996. Did a brief stint at Transamerica before I moved to National Life, where I spent a pretty big chunk of my career. I was in Vermont for about 11 years. My daughters were both born there. Then I moved to Galveston and worked at American National for about 4 years, and then came up to Austin here with Alan Bailey, and I'll have my 6th anniversary with the firm a little later this year.
Hey, Douglas.
Yep.
This is Jeff Shaw. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just have to ask a question. Were you at National Life when Jim Mallon was president?
Yes, I was.
He was. He's the past chair of the LIC. Somebody many of us really admire and have a great respect and friendship with him. So yeah, could be a great conversation for us over a drink sometime.
Yeah, no, I do. I remember him well. When he started, he was the chief marketing officer, and so when you work in product development, you get to know the chief marketing officer pretty well. So yeah, we'll have to do that. Well, let me just get kind of right into it. I've kind of organized the presentation as I sort of thought about the topic of, what are some annuity product trends. I kind of decided to put them into sort of different categories of, what are issues that are related to sort of attracting the attention of consumers or agents. What are issues that are sort of related to more of interest to the company and its financial performance or its operations. And then, what are some things that are going maybe on in terms of distribution or, in-force management. And, there's always a little bit of overlap, but I, sort of tried to organize the presentation around that idea. And sort of within the, getting the consumer or agent's attention, I've got this sort of broken down into 2 product groups, the accumulation phase and the distribution phase, because those tend to be very, very different in terms of the products and sort of the people and their interest at the time that they purchase them. Within the sort of accumulation phase, I think there are, I kind of thought there's sort of 3 big, ideas that I can see. One is, I think maybe very obvious that, people are always looking for how do I come up with an annuity product where I can sort of advertise the highest possible crediting rate. That's a good way. That's the major feature of these products. And it's a good way to get attention. So how can I come up with product designs or features that help me get ahead of the competition in terms of advertised crediting rate? And particularly the past, really several years ago, as interest rates continue to remain low, coming up with interest rates that are compelling to consumers can be very difficult. So one thing that we've seen, a lot of recently is the development of, what I call a la carte pricing. And the basic idea here is that in order to get the highest possible rate on the base product, you just strip out all of sort of the non-essential benefits. And so typically this will involve a death benefit equal to the cash surrender value and really no liquidity benefits, whatsoever. And consumers can always add these benefits back in for a fee, if they have a strong desire for them. So there may be an enhanced death benefit rider that sets the death benefit back to the account value, or you might have, a suite of different liquidity riders that you can add depending on how you might plan to take income from the annuity. Maybe it's a 10% penalty-free withdrawal rider. Maybe it's a accumulated interest withdrawal rider. Riders are typically priced as a reduction to the crediting rate, and individual riders might cost anywhere between between 5 and 35 basis points. But they can add, as much as 20 to 25 basis points to the base crediting rate, which can be pretty significant in the current interest rate environment. One other thing I'll observe while we're on this particular point is that in some of the pricing exercises we've done recently, in terms of the spread that people are setting to hit that base crediting rate, the profit target that the company is is seeking to get can have a really big impact on the pricing. And we've noticed that, there's been sort of two camps that we've seen. Some that, still very much ROI focused and want to be, solid double digits, 12% or more, versus those who are more looking at it from the point of view of a return on assets, sort of what portion of the spread are we retaining. The IRR focus tends to require really materially higher spreads and can put those companies at a little bit of a disadvantage. The second item on my list here is simple interest. I don't want to say a whole lot about this. I think it's probably already maybe pretty clear to you what sort of what the play here is. There are a very small number of players out there who are using simple interest rates. It's just a matter, just when you use simple interest, the advertised rate's a little bit higher than if it's compound. I'm not particularly a fan. I think it's, it's a little deceptive, and but it is sort of a strategy that some are using to kind of inch their way up the competitive chart. I think I'll pause there for a minute just to see if there's any questions or comments. It's always a little strange sitting in your own office talking to a phone, not knowing if anybody can hear you.
Hey, Douglas, I've got a question for you. Byron Allen with American Savings. So I'm aware of two companies, but I think they're owned by the same parent company that do this a la carte pricing, Sentinel Security and Atlantic Coast. Are there other companies that do that as well?
Yeah, there are. I don't have a list, off the cuff here, but if that's of interest to you, I could, maybe make a list and get it to Audrey or Jeff, and they could distribute to the group.
Yeah, sure. That'd be interesting if you have those resources. Otherwise, you don't know many other companies off the top of your head. And you do thing, or has this been around for a long time, and I just seen it the last couple of years?
So with the question, has this been around for a while?
Yeah, is this kind of an old concept, or is this a new concept?
Almost everything we'll talk about. There's almost nothing that's entirely new. At a recent presentation, I was talking about life insurance innovation, and I observed that I have a textbook here on my desk that was written in the late 1800s, and it's basically an actuarial mathematics textbook. And while the language is very different and a little bit more flowery, you could probably read that textbook and sit for the actuarial mathematics exam and still pass it today, because it's just the math and a lot of the concepts really haven't change, and new ideas come up and get recycled. We have been seeing, just in terms of the pricing work that we've done, we've seen a lot more interest in this concept, just because the marketplace is just so competitive, and if you can squeak out even 10 or 15 basis points, it can make a really big difference to your competitive standing. So while I probably wouldn't characterize it as a new concept, it's certainly one that's become of increasing interest, just as a way of amplifying that crediting rate. And, I guess sort of anecdotally, I've also sort of understood, from folks who are responsible for selling them, it also does create something of a, when you sort of see the difference, you mean I'm getting a 20 or 30 basis point better deal by getting rid of these benefits I didn't really care about. That sort of has a psychological impact too, just in terms of satisfaction that, I'm getting a good deal, or I've made a good choice. We see the utilization rates of the optional riders tend to be very low. So a lot of times the riders are there just to create, to let people know that, look, if you value these benefits, you can have them. But it also sort of creates a sort of a visual difference of how much more you can earn if you choose just simply not to elect them.
Hey, Douglas, this is Jeff Shaw. I'd like to chime in on that too, because I first encountered this about 15 years ago, and it was exactly that logic that you just described. At the time, there was a company saying, you know, there's a cost for liquidity. And we've got this 10% free annual withdrawal, but a lot of people have no intention of using it. And so maybe we could strip out some of these extra features, same with, you know, the annuitization at some point. All of those things maybe go with a longer surrender charge period. So kind of, at the time, it was a focus on liquidity. Not everybody wanted it. There was a cost for it. Maybe we could strip it out, give them an extra, you know, couple basis points. And to me, that makes sense. You know, you're really kind of tuning the product. It wasn't called a la carte pricing. It was more like, you know, charging extra for benefits that people really wanted and not charging for people that didn't want it, you know. I guess it's a la carte.
Were they distinct products maybe before, and whereas?
No, it was the one that we were talking, at the time I heard about it, and I thought it was a pretty clever concept, and it made sense to me, because we didn't see a lot of people. We were really focusing at that time on liquidity. And the idea was that you didn't have to worry so much about it during the surrender charge period. You could invest a little longer, a little less liquid, and not have to worry as much about it. And so you might be able to pick up a few basis points then. And so that could appeal to people, because we saw the majority of people weren't using the 10% free withdrawal. Unless it was qualified money, and it was 70.5%. Anyway, that was, it made sense at the time, and I think it makes sense to some extent. If there's enough of a benefit to consumers for stripping those out. But Douglas, does it enter into kind of a false precision to the actuarial pricing? I mean, can you really define, in the example I just gave, what the cost is for 10% free withdrawal?
Well, the simple answer is yes, we can. In the pricing models, I mean, and that's, you know, the pricing models we use, you know, include projection of benefits that are withdrawn, and, you know, depending on the sophistication of the model, even the impact that it has on the investment portfolio. To, you know, like a lot of the models we use for some of these products use stochastic investment scenarios, so that you can actually look to see, you know, if interest rates are going up, if they're going down, you know, how is that, you know, affecting the interest rate level of risk in the product. So yes, they can be, you know, the pricing can be identified, and that's probably really how these benefits, the whole idea probably came out in the first place. Is somebody said, you know, if I just take this out of the pricing model, I can lower the spread. Now, one thing I will say though is that when you look at the cost of the individual riders, the cost of the rider itself is probably more than the pickup you're getting in the spread, because one thing that we do have to do is when we price it as an optional benefit, we typically assume a higher utilization. Just if somebody's going to pay for a 10% penalty-free withdrawal rider, they probably have a higher propensity of using it than somebody who just buys an annuity contract where it's an inherent benefit. And so if you go through, so you know, Sentinel is a leader, and if you probably Google and find their chart of the cost of their different riders. If you add them all up, you say, wow, that adds up to a pretty big number. Well, part of that's because, you know, the cost of any given rider may be maybe approximately twice what its impact was when it came out of the base product.
Thanks, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I don't know whether, you know, now with all the suitability rules in place, you know, I don't know whether that's creating the heightened sense of awareness too, that, you know, if you're selling an accumulation product, and if it's really suitable, do you really need to pay extra for a liquidity benefit? You know, I guess from my point of view, I guess I would hope maybe not. You have other, you know, funds you could use if you needed to take that kind of an income, you know, unexpectedly. So, and so again, you know, the next one on the list is index annuities, and surely you're thinking that's not a new product feature, and no, it's not. But what I do wonder is, you know, are there any participants in the audience who are currently writing indexed annuities?
Everybody's head shaking no.
Okay. So, you know, they've been around. I think I remember the first, so I encountered them for the first time when I was working at Transamerica, which would have been in the, because it would have been in the late 90s. They've been around a little while. And, you know, they've lost some of their luster. I mean, that was, you know, I think that was very clearly when they first came out. It was all about, you know, I think the caps back then might have been something in the order of 10%. So it was a, you know, again, it's sort of a big number you could put out in front of an agent or a consumer that says, wow, you could earn up to 10%. with no downside risk in the market. And while they've lost some luster in the meantime, the caps aren't quite as high as that anymore. They're still a pretty large chunk of accumulation focused sales. And I think that as if interest rates continue to remain low and the stock market continues to remain strong, if companies want to continue to compete in this sort of advertised crediting rate arena, index products may ultimately really become something that companies need to consider if they haven't already. I think that the one other sort of thing I want to observe about these, the caps and participation rates have been coming down over the past couple of decades on these products, but one of the sort of turbocharges that they've sort of added back in is the income rider. And I think that a lot of times the income riders on these get positioned as, well, that's really a distribution product. That's sort of maybe in the same camp as a deferred income annuity, or maybe even a little bit closer to a SPIA. And that may be the case in a good number of cases, but I think it's also just a matter of that sometimes it needs to be very simple. Show me a very high interest rate that I can get excited about. And the roll-up rates on these income riders sort of fill that need of show me a number that's 6, 7, 8% that I can get excited about. And I don't think that's quite in the same camp as the simple interest category, but it is also one where I always sort of felt that was a little unfortunate that companies were advertising rates quite that high when if current crediting rates on fixed annuities are 2 or 3%, and the roll-up rate is 7 or 8%, something's giving somewhere. Yeah, and where something is giving is in the income rates that are being paid once you choose to take income out of those products. And those products were sort of engineered and designed to optimize that, the optics around that roll-up rate. But from that point of view, I think that's a good example of a product design that fits in this category of how do I advertise a very attractive crediting rate. But getting back to sort of the more traditional just sort of concept of an index annuity where you can, if stock market performance is strong and you want to participate in that without a lot of risk, it is still a very solid product design. And I think there's a lot of barriers though for smaller companies to get into it. Some of which being, do you have the resources to create a hedging program, to hedge the risk that you would be taking in a product like this? Do you have, the expertise to do the periodic rate setting on these products? Are you generating enough volume to actually purchase the hedge positions? And those are all, I think, legitimate concerns. But I think, collectively, there's enough professionals participating in this meeting that can cover the gamut on all of these particular issues in terms of helping smaller companies potentially enter that marketplace.
And Douglas, I'd like to chime in on that too, just because I was at a small company that designed a fixed equity index annuity, and the workings of it really aren't that complicated. I mean, especially today. This was in the 90s, so it was a whole different thing. But today, you don't need to hedge it yourself. You can easily partner. There's any number of firms out there, and the actual structure, at least for us, when we did it, New York had a 3% minimum for their non-forfeiture. So we had to at least credit 3% no matter what. And what we did is we bought our bonds like we normally did, allocated 3% of the yield of the coupon to cover that minimum guarantee, took the rest of it, and we bought a swap, which paid whatever, it mirrored whatever the contract promised in terms of the equity kicker. And the difference between what we paid them and what we earned was our spread. It was no different from managing a spread if you're buying a bond and crediting an interest rate. It was really functioned exactly the same way. And a couple of advantages that I think, we used a monthly average calculation, but the thing I found really appealing was we marketed it as a separate, a new asset class. So as long as you're not trying to deliver equity returns to people, but this monthly average gave you very different returns than what the market actually did. And the other thing I just want to mention is, when you're hedging it this way, the hedge doesn't care if the market goes up 20% or drops 10%. I mean, it's priced to return exactly whatever that is. And so the factors that usually affect that pricing are volatility or other things like that. It isn't this expectation that the market's going to do really, really well. So again, you're insulated from all of that stuff. You know what your spread is. And so the actual management of the product. But even today, I think you're going to get into this when we talk about floating rate products. The idea of linking it instead of to an equity index, but to LIBOR or 10-year Treasury or something else, if you're concerned about rates going up and being caught. I think that's a really compelling marketing case that you can make. You can really offer something that's going to protect people if rates go up. But anyway, my point is that it isn't as complicated as it sounds. We certainly did not have any expertise in any of this stuff when we did it. We found good partners. Now, with that said, sold it for 18 months, and then New York State got a new commissioner that made us pull the product. So it turned out to be a financial failure, but we learned a lot about how easy it is to do an equity index product at the time.
Well, New York is the toughest market to offer those products because of the floor that they require you to have on the minimum crediting rate. And outside of New York, where you're allowed to credit as low as 0, and I guess depending on your product design, you might even be able to design one where you could credit a little bit less than 0. You get a lot more because the more money you can basically allocate to that hedging budget, the more compelling your equity index participation is going to be. And so, New York's always been a challenge. But if you're not operating in New York, that takes a lot of that complexity off the table. Another objection I've kind of heard from companies that haven't, entered that market yet is just, will our consumers understand the products? Will they, if they don't get an interest credit in a year, they're going to get upset and sue me? Are we going to be subject to market conduct risk? And, I think so. I guess it's sort of good as part of your ERM framework to be thinking about those things, but I also think these products aren't new. I mean, there's a well-paved, path in terms of just compliance issues and market understanding, and I guess I would hope that in and of itself wouldn't necessarily be a barrier, as long as you're sort of thoughtful in terms of how you develop your marketing materials and and engage your agents. Somebody's already brought up the floating rates product, so I'm going to move on, and so we can get to that because I think that's a pretty exciting one. But before I do that, just the short-term products. So, I guess the other idea is, well, look, if I don't have a rate that's very compelling today, and if a lot of people are convinced that interest rates are poised to increase, can I sort of carve out a niche where what I'm offering is a way to have you be positioned for that change and for you to take advantage of it as quickly as possible. And so and again, this is, not particularly a new idea per se, but, it's like short-term products are a really good answer to that. So if I can design a product where either the surrender charge period is just very short by definition, or where I insert a penalty-free withdrawal window very early in the product, say in the first, 1 to 3 years, I can basically let somebody know, like, you can park your money here for a little while. You're not going to earn a very high rate of interest, but you'll probably do better than a CD, and you can, as soon as interest rates go up, you'll be poised to move that money. Now, and from the insurance company point of view, ideally, at that point in time, either, they decide to stay in the existing product because rates haven't gone up, and you can continue to earn the spread on that premium, or if rates have gone up, they choose to exchange it for a new product with you. There's a little bit, these products are a little bit tricky to price just because there is that high probability that, money could move. And if money moves in these products, it's probably moving because interest rates went up. And so you want to be pretty well matched on your investments. And so you're talking about a short-term product, so you're looking at short-term investments. So there's a lot of pressure on the crediting rate and the commission that you can offer in this situation. But I think that one potential way to deal with that issue is just to make sure that if you can pay sort of a reasonable level of commission if the money stays either in the original product or in the new product. That can sort of get the agent comfortable with, look, okay, I'm not going to make, my normal commission rate on this sale, but I'm sort of poised to make another commission in a year or two, and I'm poised to have a happy customer if they get a better rate when that happens. So the floating rate products, there's one product that I'm aware of in the market presently, and there's another one that's poised to be rolled out. I think probably in the next month or two. So the product that's on the market from Security Benefit is called the Racetrack Annuity, and it uses basically it's on a MIGA chassis. They have a 5 and a 7 year option. The basic idea with this product is that there's a guaranteed base rate, and it's guaranteed for either the 5 or 7 year period. And added to that base rate is a floating rate that for this particular product is tied to LIBOR. And for the new product that's coming out, it's tied to the federal funds rate. It gets reset periodically. I believe in this case it's annually. And so the idea here is that, if rates do in fact go up, if rates go up, it'll be reflected more quickly in the shorter term rates. So LIBOR or Fed funds rate are good indices for this concept. So sure, yes, you're locking your money in for 5 or 7 years, but if these short term rates go up in that time, you're going to participate directly in that increase in interest rates. Actually, I looked up the crediting rates this morning. So the 5 year option for the Racetrack, the base rate is 70 basis points. The current floating rate is 187 basis points for a total crediting rate of 2.57%. Just for reference, the most competitive 5 year MIGA on the street right now is 3.55, and there's a very large number of companies that have a 5 year MIGA rate of 3% or more, including a fair number of A-rated carriers. And so this is definitely a situation where I think the sales pitch is, yeah, you're earning a lower rate today. So 257 is somewhat low in terms of other 5 year MIGA products. The difference being, though, that over this 5 year period, you may end up having a significant increases in that interest rate over that period of time.
What was the name of the company that's offering that?
Security Benefit. It's called the Racetrack Annuity. I don't have any information on how well that particular product is selling. I think the concept, certainly, I understand the appeal of the concept. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I guess to me, the question is, well, what will people sort of be willing to accept the lower rate today? It's almost a full point below the most competitive rate, and maybe a half point below what I guess I'd call the top tier of competing rates in that category. So maybe I guess it just comes down to maybe somebody's individual opinion about whether or not LIBOR is likely to go up more than a half a point or a point over the next 5 years. I think the new product that I know is coming out soon is tied to the federal funds rate, which I think is maybe a little bit more appealing as an index. Just it's probably more familiar. There's a little bit of a taint associated with LIBOR at the moment, and I think people they sort of know that there's expectations that the federal funds rate is actually going to be moved in a positive direction. So, and these are the investment strategy for behind these is actually fairly simple. I mean, there are floating rate securities that you can buy that match them. You don't really need a hedging program that's as complex as the equity index products to support this product design.
What kind of strategy would you have to support that type of product?
So the product that's about to come out is a product that we've priced here. I mean, the investment strategy is just backed by floating rate bonds. In this particular case, they were matched. We were able to sort of get comparable pricing by just matching the duration of the guarantee period. So you buy a 5-year floating rate bond to support a 5-year guarantee. And so the base rate on those bonds is, typically enough to support whatever minimum guaranteed base rate that you guarantee, and then the floating rate portion tracks, reasonably well with the floating rate that you're indexed to. So, I mean, the third category I have here, sort of on the accumulation phase. I mean, so if you're not focused on your current interest rate, or you're not focused on being poised to offer a better current interest rate, sort of the other kind of big strategy is, well, let me just draw your attention to something else, and focus on either a particular need or a particular sales pitch. I think premium bonuses are a really good example of this. And it's been very popular for a while, just in terms, and there it's just a matter of, well, what's the need? The need is I want to replace an annuity that has a surrender charge. And if I can basically convince you that you'll be made whole, my job of doing that gets a whole lot easier. Long-term care benefits, it's an example of, let me just focus on a need you have that's completely unrelated to the rate of interest that we're going to credit. I think that, the bonus products have certainly been very, very popular and successful. The long-term care benefits, less so. And I think that that's probably, I guess I'm not 100% sure. In my mind, at least, and part of that may be due to the fact that I think the life insurance chassis products probably do a better job of providing the long-term care benefits than the annuities do. And it's just much more clear on the annuity products that there's a pretty significant cost to those benefits that sort of erodes the rate of interest that you're using. And so, in order for people to be interested in those products, you're giving up so much interest rate growth that they probably have to be pretty darn sure that they're going to use it for long-term care benefits in order for that to be a draw for them. And I don't know if folks in the audience have any experience or opinions about that themselves that are different from that, but I'd be interested if you do.
Anybody have thoughts on the long-term care? Nope, more head shaking.
Okay. Well, we get asked about it from time to time in terms of, should we consider products like this? And I guess I'm always a little lukewarm because I haven't really seen sales success. I understand the appeal and the fact that people, long-term care is expensive and they're looking for alternatives, but so I just haven't really seen a lot of success on the annuity chassis. All right. So on the distribution phase, yeah.
Let's have some on long-term care. I know there's one company that's advertising their long-term care annuity where you can, you get some multiple of if you take it out, long-term care benefits, you get higher returns. But you're saying that never really got traction or such. It's been a while since I've seen that advertised. I don't know if that's still being done, or is that what you were saying?
Well, the products that I'm the most familiar with basically have I think the one I'm most familiar with basically is that if you access the long-term care benefits, you can get 3 times your account value in benefits. And so, the first layer is actually liquidating the account value, and then the second layer is just then providing, benefits above and beyond that until they exhaust that benefit pool. But there's a premium for that rider that, gets paid out of the annuity contract, which just effectively creates a drag on the rate of interest that gets earned. And I guess that's, I guess that's sort of where my take comes from, that if the main benefit of an annuity contract is earning interest. And if you have a benefit that's appealing to me that doesn't cost very much, that might get my attention. But if it's going to have a significant cost, unless I know that I'm going to use the annuity for long-term care, why would I pay that much for it when, I might have other, other assets that I could use for that. Okay, so on the distribution side, so I think a lot of the, kind of product design enhancements kind of come about, related to sort of the objections or the concerns that people have about purchasing these annuities. SPIAs is one of the very first life products I worked on as a young actuary, and just, just from day one, it just sort of got drilled into my head that, that sales of these annuities are always going to be somewhat limited by the fact that people just don't want to lose the control or flexibility of having access to their money, which makes sense. And there have been a small number of companies that have tried to address this. On an annuity certain, or if you're looking at the guaranteed period for an annuity, it's certainly easy to provide liquidity because you can always just say, look, these payments are guaranteed. I can just pay you the present value of them. There's not a whole lot of risk to the insurance company. The problem, though, is if people are going to really use these products to provide, to cover the longevity risk, which is an important thing to do. How are you going to unwind a life contingent payment? And there are a small number of companies that have come out with, annuity products where you can cash out, a portion of the life contingent annuity benefit. There are also a small number of companies that have developed products where you can accelerate some of the payments. So, for example, if you're receiving a monthly payout and you need extra money at some point in time, they'll let you take the next 6 payments in advance. Both of these tend to have pretty significant limitations around them. And the reason being that it's just very difficult because the whole sort of actuarial concept that makes these products work is that, look, we don't know which of us is going to live a long time and who's going to live a short time. So let's just put all our money together and we'll use a mortality table to figure out how we're going to distribute the money so that everybody can get paid, and then the people who live the longest end up getting the protection kind of at the expense of the people who didn't. But since we don't know who's who, it's fair and we're all happy. So when you start letting people cash out of that deal where they may have knowledge about, as time progresses and I have an idea about which group I fall in there, you can create a lot of adverse selection. It really makes managing that type of product feature very, very difficult. That said, though, companies are trying to find ways around that and are developing products that try to overcome that objection. Another common concern with the distribution products is, am I going to lose purchasing power due to inflation over time? And cost of living, 3% or 2%, cost of living adjustment, those have been around for a long time and have been a common sort of means of addressing that concern. And recently companies have also started coming out with benefits that are actually linked to the consumer price index, so that the adjustment in the payments actually becomes somewhat uncertain. It's certain in that it's tied to CPI, but it's uncertain in that you don't know, well, what's the amount of the payment going to be in 5 years. And like the COLA benefits, there's a trade-off with the CPI linked benefits, which is that the initial payment tends to be lower than a non-indexed benefit. So deferred income annuities are becoming a more sort of visible and important product line in the past few years. And in my mind, I wonder whether they potentially provide a solution to both of these concerns. particularly if you are deferring the life contingent payments to a more advanced age, and then using say a fraction of your retirement assets. And I'm thinking something maybe like 85 as an example. If you the longer you defer taking life contingent payments, the better the pricing gets, just because the mortality rates get higher, and the shorter the time horizon you have over which those payments are going to be made. And so I think from the inflation concern point of view, if you're getting a better deal and if the payments are made over a shorter period of time, you're going to be less vulnerable to inflation while you're receiving those payments. And then, with respect to the loss of control and flexibility, if you wait, if you sort of manage your income needs through withdrawals from other types of products up until you're 85, my kind of thought is once you get to 85, maybe you're a little less concerned about the control and flexibility, maybe just a little bit more concerned about knowing that you've got a regular, reliable source of income. And that's kind of what always made me want, the accelerated payment option on the SPIA. If you're using this product to provide true longevity protection, and it's basically providing you regular monthly income, do you really want to take your income in advance? If this is really supposed to be your bread and butter income, during that period of your retirement. So before I advance to the next topic, I guess I'll just pause and see if there's any reaction, comments.
Why the name deferred income annuity? What makes that any different than anything else that's already out there, standard product that's already out in the market?
Well, the deferred income annuity refers to a very specific type of product where you pay a single premium so like a SPIA, it's related to a SPIA in that, like if I buy a SPIA today, I pay a single premium for income, for a defined income pattern that begins within a very short period of time. The deferred income annuity is exactly the same product, except the period of time that you wait is much, much longer. It might be 20 years, it might be more. And so part of what makes those products work is just the fact that, in the most purest form, there's a lot of pricing leverage, because if there's no death benefit, there's sort of a lot of value. A lot of people, if I do buy a 20-year deferred product, a fair number of people will die before that 20-year period is up, and those values can then be used to support the benefits of the people who survive. It's really almost in a way sort of like funding a pension, something like that, depending on what the levels of death benefits are and whatnot.
So did I understand you correctly? These deferred income annuities do not have a death benefit?
No, they typically do. And it varies from product to product how much it is and how it works. But just from a pure actuarial point of view and what would develop the best pricing, the best pricing would be developed from a product that did not have a death benefit. I think that outside of maybe actuaries, I don't know that product would have much marketing appeal. But again, it's just sort of the basic idea of I don't know if I have a lot of money, if I have a large chunk of money that I'm willing to invest, when I'm 65, and I just don't know. Look, I don't know if I'm going to survive to 85 or not. But if I buy a product today, and it could promise me twice as much income if it didn't have a death benefit than if it did, would I be willing to sort of take that risk that, well, look, if I'm dead, it doesn't matter. I didn't need the income anyway. But if I am alive, I get a much higher income because I was willing to sort of position that asset to basically provide zero value if I didn't survive. And so in a way, it's maybe sort of like buying term insurance. I pay a premium for term insurance. I may never see a benefit from it, but I'm still willing to do it because I might. Now, term's a much smaller premium. But I think, so I'm going to, the deferred annuities, deferred income annuities are available in the market and they can be purchased. I actually think there's a competing product design that might actually make a lot of sense. It's not an annuity product though. If you have a cash value, whole life product, I think you can construct a very compelling deferred income product that way, where the idea is, well, if you buy permanent life insurance, and if almost all permanent life insurance products have settlement options in them that include life contingent annuity payments. So if you buy that cash value product and you still own it and it's in force when you're 85 years old, I mean, you're not protecting income anymore. And if you basically just take your cash value and annuitize it at that point, you can get a pretty compelling. I've actually sort of done this with a couple different contracts. You can actually get pretty compelling income out of a contract at that point. And so there's sort of a lot of different ways to deal with that issue of there's some point where there's going to be a very strong focus on the need to provide longevity protection. I don't know how much longer I'm going to live, and I've only got so much money, so I need to position it in a way that I'm guaranteed that I'm never going to run out of income. And that's a nice one because particularly if you start an insurance plan when you're younger and you buy a significant amount of permanent whole life insurance, and you do survive at that point, well, here's a way you can use it to your benefit. If you did end up using it to support survivors. Okay, and I perceive I'm going to run out of time, so I'll kind of move on to some of the ideas that are sort of more related to the life insurance company's performance and operations. One is, this one I kind of struggled where to put it, the CD annuities. These products have become fairly popular. We've priced a fair number of them in the past few years. The idea here with these are MYGA annuities where at the end of the guarantee period, there's typically a 30-day window where people can take the money out without penalty. And then after that 30 days, it renews for another interest rate guarantee period, along with a new surrender charge schedule. And the reason that I put it in this category is that I think that is an attractive feature to the insurance company where they can sort of continue then to have sort of strong asset liability management where they can continue to invest to support a competitive crediting rate on these annuities as they renew, but still be protected against early surrenders. We do cash flow testing for a large number of companies that have pretty significant balances of liquid annuity funds on their books, and that's a really tricky situation to be in. You want to offer a competitive rate to those folks and make sure they stick around, but they could surrender at any time, which kind of limits how long you might prudently want to invest those funds. So you're developing this product type where you can it's really almost sort of like it becomes new money to you again each time the product renews in terms of the surrender charge protection and how you can view your investment strategy. And I guess in hindsight, I probably should have queued up the Interstate Compact to follow that, because the Interstate Compact has really gotten a lot of traction, and we do most of our filings through the Compact now. It's very cost effective. It covers the vast majority of states, and it has uniform standards. So you can have the same contract in all states. In the Interstate Compact, there was a period of time several years ago where there was just sort of a lot of state variation in terms of how they were enforcing annuity non-forfeiture rules. And some of you may remember, the sort of the 70-10 standard and whether a given state was enforcing that or not. The Compact has very reasonable standards for annuities, and they support and permit the CD annuity concept. So that's been a very, very helpful and useful tool for us the past few years. So, new money versus portfolio crediting strategies. This sort of kind of links back a little bit to, advertising a competitive crediting rate. The companies who use a portfolio strategy, are going to have a short-term advantage while interest rates are going down, which is kind of where we've been. But new money companies are going to have an advantage when interest rates start going up, particularly if they start going up rapidly. And I think if you sort of look at, the big commercial carriers that are selling a lot of annuities, most, if not all of those annuities are going to be supported by a new money strategy, where they're just viewing that's new money coming in that we're going to invest when we receive it, and we need those investments to support the liabilities that we're assuming at that time. That creates a little bit of additional complexity when it comes to managing renewal rates. They need to sort of keep track of and segregate those assets a little bit so that they know which assets are backing which products. But that's a strategy that can, in a rising interest rate environment, can kind of help keep you nimble and ready to move quickly with the market. It may even be that a lot of companies that have historically used portfolio strategies, if rates spike up significantly, might kind of think about whether they want to sort of create a new sort of investment generation for the new business, where they kind of look at that separately from their current in-force business. Particularly, if you're using a new money strategy, a disciplined rate setting process is pretty important. I think that really requires participation of at least 3 groups of people. One is actuaries, or people who are sort of responsible for the pricing. Another is the salespeople who know the market, know what the competitive pressures are, and the third is the investment manager, who knows, well, what can we, what kind of yields can we get on new money that's coming in, and just forming a regular process where all 3 of those things are considered, and ideally also where there's a look back to see, well, we made this decision last month, how did it work out for us? How did sales perform? Did we actually achieve the rate of investment that we thought we were? Were we able to get our pricing spread? Ratings maintenance, I think probably no mystery to you. I mean, AM Best doesn't really, I think I had an analyst once just tell me point blank, we don't think that annuity companies should be A-rated. So having large annuity reserves relative to life can be difficult for maintaining an A rating. So looking for ways to balance the life and annuity premium, can be important if ratings are important to you. As well as just making sure that when they do look at your annuities, that they see that there are good controls for credit and interest rate risk. And I've got owner-driven contracts on here just because we've had a lot of clients where we've observed that a lot of their annuity contracts are annuitant-driven. And it's just important from a tax point of view. In order for an annuity to be an annuity for federal income tax purposes, it needs to be owner-driven, which means that the death of the owner drives whether or not a death benefit is paid. So I just put that there as a note, just maybe if that's something you're not familiar with or you're not sure about, you could sort of check and sort of see where you are on that particular issue. And then just sort of in terms of distribution or in-force management, what's going on there. I saw a press release just the other day that Prudential is developing a direct-to-consumer product. The only thing I could glean from the announcement was that it was a deferred income annuity and that it was going to be distributed via direct response through their group insurance benefits. So I think, direct-to-consumer, I mean, there's a lot of activity in direct-to-consumer. On the life insurance side, you got Haven, which I believe is a subsidiary of MetLife, kind of in the term marketplace. Ladder is a startup company, a digital direct-to-consumer on the life insurance side. Annuities, I think, you know, they're a simple product, easy to apply for. It seems to me that there's potentially a market in the future for, you know, direct-to-consumer sales there. And then, you know, been a lot of focus in the last several years on, you know, straight-through processing. So electronic applications, electronic policy delivery, even electronic statements and notifications. On the one hand, you know, annuity applications are very simple, you know, so it's maybe not, you know, from a processing point of view, maybe not quite as big a deal, and you know, as getting an e-app for a life insurance policy. But you know, on the flip side of this, we see a lot of interest in, you know, having, particularly like with flexible premium annuities. You know, could we have a, you know, flexible premium annuity with a minimum $100 premium? Well, you know, that there's a lot of pricing pressure on that. You know, we're dealing with spread income, and if you're, you know, if you're getting 100 basis point spread and you've got to pay a commission, you know, the amount of money you have to spend to, you know, administer a contract becomes a real significant driving force in terms of how low you can have those minimums be. And I think if you can develop a complete electronic process end to end, you know, that'll, you know, that could reduce costs enough for you to maybe have a material impact on the how low you could have those minimum premiums be, and it may also have an impact in terms of just getting more interest at younger ages in terms of some of these annuity products. So I think I've just about used up my time. I don't have any other pressing engagements, though, so I'm happy to take any other questions or continue discussion as long as you like.
Any questions, Douglas?
I have one. On the deferred, what you're calling the deferred income annuity, so those, they don't have any kind of withdrawals from this, right? Like they just can't take withdrawals because they're putting it in there. I'm just trying to understand how they work. So they're putting it in there so that they can increase their income later in life. And it wouldn't make sense to have withdrawals in there, so I'm just checking on that.
Yeah, the product, it's not a very standardized product yet. There's not a, it's not as common in the marketplace as FIAs are yet, but there are, I mean, there can be withdrawal or surrender provisions, and they vary. It's just anything, and it's just there's a tension just between maintaining that desire to have access to the money or to change my mind versus pricing performance. And the more restrictions that those products can have on, no, you've made your decision that, you know, the money is going to come out as an income stream later, which is what we agreed on, the better the income is going to be. And so, but, you know, the marketplace, though, it just isn't, you know, isn't ready for the actuarially pure product. And so there are product designs out there that do have both death benefits and withdrawal benefits. So if this is a product line, you know, that you're sort of thinking about, hey, maybe we ought to look at developing one of these ourselves. I think the first step would be, you know, look, just do a sort of market scan. You know, what are, you know, in terms of peer competitor companies that are offering these, what's the current level of benefits that are being offered? What are do we have a vision for what we think our consumers are going to be? What trade-offs are they going to be willing to make? And do we potentially even want to offer different options, just sort of like the a la carte pricing, where we can say, look, if you want, I can give you the absolute best deal by stripping out all these other benefits. And then particularly if you offer them side by side, that can really sometimes help bring a lot of clarity to, well, what is it you're buying? You know, bundled versus unbundled. And
Anybody else?
I'm trying to remember if I have the file still here on my desk. There was a really good, I think Limra and Canex put out a really nice report a few years ago, sort of just outlining the current FIA and DIA marketplace in terms of product features and just companies that were currently active in that market. And so if that's a product, if those are products that are of interest to you, probably not too hard to find that report. to the Google search, and I could also add that to my list. I could probably find the PDF of it and send it to Audrey and Jeff if they want to disseminate it to the group.
Thank you, Douglas. You've been really helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, a lot of really great ideas and great resources.
Well, I really enjoy my job. I mean, it's I do product development because it's sort of creative, and I get to meet a lot of people, and it's something I enjoy and I'm excited about. And the other thing too, I mean, one of the benefits, if you're going to work in product development, you got to meet people, because you got to get, you can't do it in a vacuum. You have to get ideas from people who are out there in the marketplace, who are actually selling, or who are actually administering, who are actually have other experiences than you. So I very much value the opportunity to do this from that point of view as well.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.
It's up so early, too.
Yeah, it really actually failed to click for me that it was going to be 7:30 my time, but no problem.
Have a good afternoon.
All right, thanks. Take care.